Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast. It's Tommy and Mike. Good morning.
Mike, good morning.
Good morning. How's it going today?
Dude, it's going pretty good. It's going great.
Well, it's good to hear. We are just clipping along this summer. We've got some more great conversations today. I don't have a whole lot of news items. Anything that you have kind of beat from the street, Tommy? Anything you want to talk about today?
What are we talking about today?
Let's get into our main topic. So let's give you the quick title here. The main topic is DataOps is the future of Power BI teams. Okay, we're just going to unpack what is the word DataOps, data operations. How does this word impact our workflow? What do we do with it today? How does this work between different environments? I think this is more of a complex concept. I think people already, if you have any kind of concept of multiple environments or deploying things in dev test into prod, you'll be experiencing this pain that is data ops. So how do we build this? How do we make sure we have quality in our data? And what kind of techniques or things have we done to start leveraging the ability for us to be able to test and make sure that data operations becomes part of our team? Anyways, that's our intro. Tommy, what's your beat from the street today?
This is actually a little personal here, and I just want to say how some things just hold up over time. So for Father's Day, we had to celebrate it this Sunday. My wife got sick, so on Father's Day. So one of the things I want to do for the kids, I have an 8-year-old, 6-year-old, 4-year-old. I'm like, I think it's time. I think they're at their ripe age to see one of the classics, and I think it's time for them to see Star Wars.
Oh, Star Wars!
Guess what? It holds up. We watched the original, A New Hope. Yep. And I wasn't sure because you know how graphics and all these kids today and all the movies and it has to be all these CGI stuff. I'm like, I wonder how this is going to hold up.
Yeah.
I remember when I watched it and you're stunned. And guess what? It holds up better than I remember for the kids too. They were the whole time just watching it with eyes open, mouth open, just like, eyes completely like, and I'm just thinking to myself as they're watching Darth Vader, I'm like, their minds are going to be blown in the next one.
So
they were like,
are you starting them at the very beginning? Like, are you starting in the order in which they came out? Or are you starting them at the beginning of the, okay. So you're starting with,
I'm one of those. I watched the first, those other three. I don't know if I count those. Terrible.
Well, it's good. It's part of the story, but there's a lot of story that goes along with all these episodes. And this is going to open up a can of worms because now you watch this and then you watch like The Mandalorian and there's a lot of other shows that go along with it. So the universe of Star Wars Star Trek, Star Wars is quite large. And so, yes, I had that same kind of joy and moment letting my kids watch the movies as well. And that was fun and letting them see like the characters and it's good.
And I'm not even a huge Star Wars person. Like I'm by far and away, I do not know a lot. I know they're good movies and I know they're classics. They're well-made movie, but I'm definitely not in the universe. That being said, these are ones that are going to have some reaction for the first time watcher.
Yeah, they're going to entertain.
And they all loved it, but that actually leads me to a question I had for you because I cannot wait really to show my daughter the oldest Jurassic Park.
Oh boy!
But what age? What's the age where it's not abuse? Because I don't want her in our bed on my
scared.
Bed at night.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna. My kids are older, and none of my oldest is 15, and we still haven't watched Jurassic Park yet.
Oh my gosh, that's what we have to do today.
I mean, it's just been something it's a good movie, but those early ones, those are pretty scary. Like I remember those being like those are pretty intense scenes in there. So
kind of just showing the first one,
Well, the one that I get a little bit more excited about was jumping into Harry Potter and doing the Harry Potter series. That one was a little more tame, but there's a lot of them, and we really got into that series, and that was also super fun.
I think the biggest thing it shows, especially with I watched Jurassic Park again because, and you're like, okay, there's maybe 10 minutes of dinosaurs in the whole movie, but a well-made movie, and I think like a lot of things, something well-made holds up. And even with Jurassic Park, where the CGI was okay, like when you actually look at it from '93, there's only 10 minutes of dinosaurs. But I'll tell you what, you will imagine a velociraptor coming in your room and you'll turn the lights on. So
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Awesome. Good opener. That's fun. Those are good times to start sharing those moments with your kids as you introduce them to things that were classics when you were growing up. I will also, I feel also note the amount of movies that come out nowadays, not as good. It doesn't feel like the storyline, the plot just seems like a repeat of everything else. The plot line and just the amount of things going on in Star Wars was just really good. And there was always kind of a different story happening somewhere. And yeah, really like that story. Awesome.
And that's exactly what I'm saying. The good things hold up.
Yes, correct. Good storylines hold up. All right, let's jump into our main topic for today. So today, let's jump into DataOps. Oh, there we go.
Oh, do you hear something?
We have our caller back again. Welcome back, Matthias. Jumping back in here again. Hello and good morning, good evening to you as well.
Hello, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We figured we bring in the expert here to talk about DataOps, what this does look like, and how we can unpack this topic. Matthias, let me kick this one over to you. The topic just today purely is, what are we doing in DataOps? Like, we've heard this term a couple times. I mean, maybe some people are speaking on it. You're starting to hear this at conferences a little bit more. Maybe, Matthias, give us a quick overview of what is DataOps and why is this kind of fitting with our series of CI/CD and DevOps? Well, how does this fit into the story here a little bit, maybe?
Sure. Well, I mean, in a nutshell, DataOps is basically trying to take all the learnings and all the patterns and practices from DevOps and applying it to data analytics, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one-liner. And obviously, we've talked about DevOps for a bit now. So we've seen it's all about automation, breaking down barriers, better communication, CI/CD. I think those are the key ones, really. So if I want to take this and sort of apply it to data analytics, there are two big elephants, in my view, that stand out. One is, in data analytics, you have data containers, databases, lakehouses, whatever. Those are big chunks. They're normally not easily movable. You normally can't easily recreate them, right? So this is, you might have petabytes of data sitting somewhere. Unlike in software development, where you just put the whole thing on your laptop and sit in a park and rebuild your solution. You can't easily do that when you have a dependency on petabytes of data. So that's one thing. And then the other one I would say is, look, as much as in the software world, DevOps is quite advanced in terms of skills, etc. In the data world, it's even more so. So I think from a skills and even acceptance perspective, there's a bigger challenge here. We have to deal with people who are maybe not very familiar with using Git even, or don't, so there's a lot more to do in terms of training, upskilling. So yeah, definitely an interesting space. But whilst I've focused on the challenges here, the big benefits ultimately would be you can rely a lot more on automation. You can scale better. You can rely on higher quality because you've got automated tests. You probably have a system where you can roll back if someone pushed a faulty notebook or so. Those are the good things that you want to get out of it. But in terms of getting there, particularly when you have an existing sort of brownfield project, you need to go through a few steps, and hopefully we can sort of break that down a little bit today.
Yeah, so I like these points. I think this is in my impression, some of the challenges I have seen around DataOps or just getting people kind of familiar with it. To your point, Matthias, I think this is a great point, a distinguishing point. my reports, my semantic model, the metadata that goes along with those things, aside from the refreshing of data, all that can be checked into Git fairly easily, and the file sizes are relatively small. Now with PBIP format, we get a nice little small metadata layer that describes the information in the data. It's when we get to these, and I to some degree here, I also look at this going like Microsoft wants the big clouds, they want to hold your data because they realize there's a strategic advantage for them to be able to allow it to make it easy for you to store data cheaply in their storage accounts. Because what happens then is, to your point, once you start accruing a volume of data, people aren't going to move between Fabric and AWS and Google. I've even seen other customers who are heavily Microsoft products. They already have a lot of data already built inside AWS. They're like, yeah, it's really expensive for us to move it out of there to somewhere else. So there's just, how can we aggregate? How can we pare down the data as little as possible and then only lift just the small pieces of that data over to like reporting and analytics on the other side of things? So there's all these choices that are being made or trade-offs between like, where does the data sit in raw form and how does that work? I also feel like a trend you mentioned, Matthias, around rolling back changes on data. And I think there's also a trend here recently around lake houses and this new Delta Parquet kind of format of tables. There's been also I think a shift in mentality around when I bought the SQL server, the compute was cheap because I had paid for the machine. The machine was built, it was on-prem, I paid for it. The storage was expensive. So I'm bringing in, data, I'm quickly aggregating it, I'm making staging tables. I only have the staging tables long enough to update my actual records to make sure that the data is up to date. But I was worried about filling up the drive. I didn't bring down a full copy of my operational system every day because I was worried about the storage getting filled up. And then I had to go buy more of that and more machine. And so the flip side now is happening in the cloud where storage is almost like cheap. So now you kind of just throw everything in there. And so I think there's a lot of, especially when I talk to like developers who are moving into Fabric, a lot of them are still in that SQL mindset of like, we've got to really not store a lot of information. I'm like, actually, in the cloud, we want to optimize for how little can I compute the data to get the answers I want. So there's even a mindset shift, I think, occurring here from my observation as well. I'd love to unpack this one. One last thought here, Tommy, over to you. What are your thoughts around DataOps? What are your experiences or either friction points, maybe even with Fabric?
Well, it's interesting the points that we've already made just right off the bat that I'm finding incredibly intriguing as we dive into this. First off, Mike, I just want to briefly touch on what you said, where when we're talking about where the data is being stored, I think DataOps, DevOps, it's independent of the platform. Right. Yeah. Whether you're using AWS, if you're using whatever Google's got, or if you're using your own custom built in-house data operation, you don't necessarily need to worry about whether it's Fabric or not. So right off the bat, we're talking independent platforms. Mm-hmm. It's funny that as we get into this conversation, the last 2 episodes, some people may have felt that I'm more adverse to this. I've taken more of the, we'll say, devil's advocate side of the conversation. All that being said is really because I am trying to think of the general audience here. A lot of people are not used to this. For myself personally, with teams that I work on, we're all in DataOps. We're all in using source control, even just the basics, making sure that's part of the conversation. Now, as we dive into Fabric specifically here, there's a few things I want to share that I actually found online on some people talking about DataOps. And their opinions about this moving forward.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm working with a client right now, and they are not a Power BI shop. They want to be. And the conversation I had with them, actually, I feel like just yesterday, was they wanted a lake house. They wanted all the things last year. And I basically said, we don't even have a database. We need, all your data is in Excel. So we're not even close to
is
that.
Not
right.
a database.
right. Yeah. It's like, listen, we're not there yet, but the conversation I had is like the technology's really moved so fast with things being GA, especially because as a consultant, we don't push preview things where I'm like, you're in a place where we can actually push Fabric right now for an organization that's starting from an Excel background. You don't necessarily have to have the data engineering background now to work in Fabric. all that being said, I think we're moving to a point, and this is where I want to kind of lead into actually the kind of the spark of today's conversation is, to me, the future of really development teams, whether you like it or not, I think it's going to be in data ops and this idea. I don't think a lot of organizations are going to survive doing the SharePoint, doing the old way of the old approach towards Power BI development. So one of the things I'm just going to read here, and I want to get your guys' take here, is this is from Ahmad Shani, and he's a consultant. I'm not sure exactly where, but this is kind of where this hot take came from. I've been fascinated with the topic and the potential of DevOps, data ops for us data folks, and have some addressing for the hardest challenges that data teams struggle with. It increases team and developer productivity with balancing stability and accuracy. It seems like an oxymoron, but I really believe that data ops is the solution. And with all the tooling and fabric all coming together, there's a massive opportunity to accelerate data teams' performance in developer and end user centric way. And I really believe this, and I'll kind of leave it here for your guys' opinion. But to me, I really think if you're working in Power BI or if you're working in Fabric, it's going to be a necessity, a prerequisite skill to do data ops or to at least know the basics if you want a job.
That's a good point.
Can I say something
kick it over to you. Yeah, go ahead.
Which just, particularly since you mentioned Fabric a few times.
So yeah.
It happens on the show. So
I think embracing data ops ironically means to not do a lot of things that you're being shown or told when it comes to Fabric. You know, the kind of sort of keynote demo, you know, where everything is super quick and easy, and you open a browser and click around, and then you suddenly have a massive warehouse or lake house, and just run some Python scripts against it from a notebook. Sadly, that's the polar opposite of how you actually want to think about a data ops project, right? So, which is one of the challenges in terms of sort of bringing those ideas out there and convincing people. You, particularly with projects that have already started, you're going to have to rethink and undo a lot of stuff just to make it possible for automation to kick in, for instance. I'll leave you with that, just sort of as a controversial point here.
I don't think you're wrong here at all. I don't think you're wrong at all. I think this data ops story is not in contrast, but I think so. Going back to your points earlier, Matthias, I think your points earlier there. When we look at like where teams are mature and what have they been kind of studying to get us to where we are right now, I think a lot of teams in the data space is not thinking about this data ops mentality. How do I make sure that the data that comes through my pipeline, that gets to the end of the pipeline, is like of high quality? We have some tests, we have at least some metrics, and instead of, I feel like a lot of the data projects we work on in companies are reactionary. Something bad happens, and then we go try to solve where the problem came from, as opposed to the opposite, which I think is more of the data ops mentality, is we understand what the data should look like, and we apply some expectations to the data and our process. And then through that, the data ops allows us to be able to be more not reactionary, but proactive. Right? We know this table didn't load. We know these number of records didn't show up where they should have. We know someone's starting to put text into a numerical column that's now breaking our downstream pipeline stuff. Like, so those are things that help us build this data operational piece. And one thing that we haven't even touched on yet, which is there's actually a security element to all of this data ops as well, right? So there, especially when you get into like healthcare and financial spaces, the data that's sitting inside production has potentially secure information in there, or PII, or personalized identifiable information. And you can't have that in test or dev. So there has to be even additionally, when we're talking about these different servers, the dev environment runs on the dev server, and the test server runs on the test server, and the prod server pulls from the prod database. In these situations, we have to have someone in the data engineering team taking data from prod and going backwards and saying, okay, we're either going to obfuscate this data, or we're going to mock up new data that is in dev but is representative of what's happening in production. So again, just another kind of point to the conversation around what I think DataOps is trying to consider here. It's this multi-environment. The data is not the same in every single environment. How do you build tests around this stuff? We've been doing an extensive amount of testing and things with automated pipeline runs. A lot of examples that I see are, we are a company, we do data, and that company has many customers. Each customer gets their own kind of like lake house of their own data, and those companies feed data through a data processor, a business, right? And that business understands, hey, you're going to give us a bunch of random data. We will reshape it and make these nice, pretty reports on the outside. So here's your reports back. You give us data, we'll give you back these really nice reports to help you run your business. Well, when you have hundreds of customers, you start seeing patterns in bad data across all of these customers. And smart companies start thinking about, how can we solve an alert and produce this as a full product where we're no longer having to go through and throw people at every single customer to test all their data. We should be able to start, signing off on large chunks of this information and the data very quickly, right? This is where I think DataOps really starts applying a lot of good help here, when you start scaling out these things and you have larger teams, more people. To your point, Tommy, SharePoint doesn't really fit the large team data sharing space here. It does it to a point, but it kind of falls apart at some point as well. So I'll pause there. My thoughts.
Yeah, your operative word there is smart companies, and which also can be interchangeable for rare. Okay, so I think there's I got to touch on
yes and no. I think the companies that are
know.
The companies that are not having these issues probably aren't calling me, right? So, right? The ones that have data kind of figured out, or at least can, get around it, right? They're not calling for help and asking for these things. But, when there is challenges, that's when consultants, that's when experts kind of get brought into space and bring what they know.
I feel like we always touch on this, Mike. The reason why I jumped into the consulting space in the first place, I was talking to my neighbor who works at a multinational bank, and they're still using Excel. So we know this is it's a thing. It's a big thing. But there's a big point here where this is, to me, has always been, I think, what I think a lot of people get frustrated with when they hear this conversation that we're having about DataOps or DevOps, and they see what's available in Fabric. To me, this is also the hardest thing as well, where it's so easy to create things. And this is kind of what Matthias' point that I wanted to touch on. It is so easy to do things in Fabric. It takes me 3 clicks. I can create a notebook. 4 clicks, I can create a lakehouse, which was previously nowhere near what it took. Mm-hmm. But to your point, that completely flies in the face of what you think is from your traditional, if you're going to build a real project. And I think this is going to be the struggle we're going to be dealing with, is it's almost too easy to create and do things in data, and especially in Fabric, which flies in the face of the normal development cycle. And honestly, I'm getting the same frustration with some of the clients right now, or some projects, because most people, one of the earlier points, we have to still go over this hurdle. Unlike if you work in software or web development or any front end, back end, ops, some sort of ops. It's a prerequisite. Mike, I don't want to go a hot take here, but maybe 15% of people who work in Power BI know what Git is or have used Git, or the number's probably less, right? So there's a lot of big selling points we're saying here. And if I'm saying this hot take on that the future of Power BI development is in DataOps, which I truly do believe, there's a lot more preaching we have to do. There's a lot of frustration that's going to happen between now and then.
Let me just come back on the opposition we seem to have against clicky, dracky, droppy, right? Yes. So, because it's not all bad, right? I mean, there's actually something really positive to it. Arguably, right, just being pragmatic here, there's a lot of value in the real world in terms of getting something out there quickly, right? But the real question comes, how long does that last, that kind of solution, right? So what I would propose, particularly from a consultant perspective, is it's awesome and correct and absolutely fine to click your way through a browser workspace in order to get a V1 out there and to solve an immediate business problem, right? And you should do it that way. But what I would say, the big but then is, if you then want to go from V1 to V2, this is when you have to think about what does it take now for this to automate and to scale and to divide between different team members. And then you need to step back and think about, well, what are these artifacts that I've created now? Let's have a look at them, what they look like in terms of code. How can I store this in source control? And most importantly, how can I now define additional non-production environments of it, which normally requires putting parameters in and figuring out how I can clone or mock or duplicate data just for testing purposes, right? So that's the approach I would very strongly recommend here. Click as much as you want to get this urgent report, this urgent metric out there, but then don't think that this is the ultimate final way this project is actually going to live and scale and iterate.
I like that a lot. And I think this is something where Tommy and I debate or argue a lot about, like, it feels like let me say it this way. It's a fuzzy line between just build it to get it working and then polish it to make it reliable, right? So I'm very much in the opinion of, like, we do want people, like, so I don't want to spend months and months and months of time building something that's just not going to be used by the business, right? That's a waste of our money. Like, and that is a pure requirements miss. We didn't quite understand. We didn't have the right data, or we didn't get far enough to make, we didn't have enough information, I think, to allocate the team to build what the business really wanted. And so I'm a firm believer of have the business out in front of the IT organization, experimenting and building and kind of building these kind of version 1 of things, right? With the mindset that of, if this artifact, if this fast moving project turns into something that is adding real value, and we now have a lot of, like, gains interest. The people that are looking at it are VPs, very high up in the company. That's very important data. Like, you have to gauge that and then say, okay, now that this is important enough, let's take another V2 look at this and then start applying some of these, DevOps principles, DataOps principles on top of this. And then you have the ability to come back and make it. So I would kind of think of it first as, don't build the cheapest thing first, just build it so it works first. Then come back and plan on optimizing it once you know that it's adding value. Because then you can justify the cost of the additional people to make it go, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, if I may just come in on that. There's also, I mentioned skills earlier. There's a huge organizational component here, right? The people who would be able to initiate a project from scratch and to do that first V1, those would be, I'd say, your most senior people, right?
Probably yes. Yes.
Now, are you going to be able, as a company, do you want only those people to run your projects on a daily basis with more iterations? No, right? Organizationally, you will want to delegate future iterations as much as possible to more junior people. And the really big point I would make is DevOps and DataOps are crucially important if you want that kind of organizational scale, right? If you want to be able to give really important projects into the hand of more junior people, you absolutely require to have all the tooling and the automation in place that you get from DevOps and DataOps.
100% agree with this one. And I think, to your point though, this is how organizations actually scale themselves. Because again, you can have those experts building the one pattern, but if they're not building those patterns on top of DevOps or DataOps, how do you hand that to somebody else that's more junior? They need a little bit more rules and structure to follow, so that way their quality meets the standard of the expert builders on everything. That's going to have to happen. Oh, I love that. That's a really good point.
It's funny because when you say that initially, it almost sounds like the world is flat. Like it sounds so that it flies in the. It sounds like
Tommy's a flat earther.
No. We are complete sphere, baby. But it sounds like it flies in the face of normal conditional, or like your normal logic or common logic, that everyone has to have this background or this skill, even if they're junior. But no, I can see that now. As we're having this conversation, we've talked about DevOps a lot, and we've talked about the traditional process. I think there's a philosophical argument here that can be said, and Mike knows I've said this a ton or asked this question a lot.
Oh boy,
I want to ask you: does the technology change process principles? And the reason I ask this is I've even said this around the medallion approach, where traditional processes that we've had or methodologies that we've had has been dictated because that's how the technology is. We have technology that's so easy to use right now to create things that I think a lot of traditional processes are, honestly, they become legacy to a degree. Does Fabric, or really more importantly, does the rapid technology growth that we've had, especially in the last few years, change some of the principal processes that we have in DataOps? I like that pause. I will take that pause. So,
Mathias, you're experiencing what I experience a lot. So sometimes Tommy throws. Yes, Tommy will throw these questions at you, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I got to really think about this." And like you're expecting me to like on the cuff produce an answer. I'll let you stall if you need to stall for a bit. I can fill in.
I think it's a good question. I think it's a good question. So.
It's a good question. You go, Mathias, to you.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, yes. You can dream up, the most perfect processes. If you don't have the right tooling available to then implement them, there's no worth to it, right? So just looking at your point from the other angle, from the other side, it goes that way as well. Yeah, of course. Just to give a very mundane real world example, right? Something which I really love about Power BI is the power of Power Query. The fact that you have extremely easy accessibility to hundreds and hundreds of external data sources. And provided you've got credentials, you can just connect to anything out there, even SharePoint, and immediately see your data in the Power Query window, and then actually doesn't take very long to turn it into a semantic model, and then from there it doesn't take very long to have a report, and the story sort of writes itself. What would we have done? What would we do without that piece of kit, right?
Yes.
You'd have to study APIs for whatever obscure data source you want to connect to. You might have to do some really low level development to even be able to pull some data from it. So let's just appreciate that the sheer fact that this particular tool exists, it opens up fantastic possibilities. Now, coming back to your point, the same applies, to your team workflow and how far you can and want to go in terms of automation and automated testing. Where I think we'll probably have some more limits nowadays and some scope for better tooling to come out. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I like where you're going with this one, and I would also I want to throw in a little bit of other piece in here as well. So I like the idea of Power Query. I think it's a great starting point. I think we all know how to shape the data, right? There's people, and I've also often told people inside Excel, you're already doing data engineering. You're just doing it manually inside an Excel sheet with like cleaning out files and removing columns and parsing this little bit of data here. You're already doing, you know what you need to do. You already understand the process and what you need to do to clean up stuff so you can go put it into a bar chart or whatever that thing is. I think what we're doing now, though, is we're bringing tools, and this is where I've said this a number of times in the podcast, we're making this a commodity. Everyone can start doing it. We're going to bring this down even further. And I think as I look at the trend of what's going on here, these whole things called MCPs, the large language models, right? The amount of detail, and this is, I said this on a kind of a different podcast, but I think this is really resonating with me right now. I'm really having a moment of like, aha, a little bit here is, the large language models and these MCP models are changing how I think about what I do as my work. And what I mean by this is I can focus less on the syntax and I can focus more on like the process and the concepts or what I'm trying to apply. So that barrier to me, to your point, Mathias, studying APIs and writing all the JavaScript or Python or, SQL scripts, I can now talk to an AI and say, I'm looking to get this kind of information. Can you just give me a starting point? And I can be pretty good about reading through some of the code. And even having like the buddy with you, right? I was using a Python function the other day and it used a function called melt. I didn't know what melt meant. I didn't know what it was doing. So I actually asked it, what does this function do? And can you give me another example so I can understand what it was doing? So I was asking it a question, it produced an answer, and then I was able to kind of confirm the answer. So learning is happening right in line with actual development in a faster way. So when I look at this, I'm saying like the iterations and the cycles that we're going through here is going faster and faster. Now, let me go back up to Tommy's point here as well. I really think, Tom, you have a great point here. We're looking at this DataOps process, and there's this, does the process inform the technology, or does the technology inform the process? Yes, it's a joint between them, right? Yeah. You should understand what your process should be, and then you pick the technology that makes it as easy as possible to follow your process, right? Again, this is like a DataOps thing, right? And let me give you another example, a real world example here. If I have data in production, test, and dev, I don't need every single record from production. Production may have 5 or 10 years of data inside the system, and it's large. It's very expensive to hold all that information. I may only need a subset of that. And also, there may be some security rules I need to do on top of that data. So what we have found is test once a week gets the last 6 months of data from production. You basically delete all the data in test, you grab what's in production, and you only grab 6 months of it. So now you're not expending the additional cost of all these tables and years and years and years of data, because when you're working on years and years of data, the queries just run slower. The time to develop things slows down. And then even in dev, you may even take something smaller than that. You may do that every day, but only grab a month. So the process, like, let's talk about the process, like methodology wise, we'd always say, yeah, that makes sense. Now here's where the gap comes in, right? Does Fabric give you an easy copy, replace, security, where's the easy button that Power Queries this type of experience where I can just kind of and then I'm going to go another concept here, virtualization of data all the way through my different layers. There's not. And so this is my point. The technology has not made my process any easier. So therefore, I'm going to expend in this DataOps process, I'm going to spend a bit more effort to get this stuff done. Now, here's the opportunity, and Mathias, I think you're gonna chime in here as well. Navidata, your company, Mathias, right, is aiming to look at problems like this. And so while the Microsoft tool doesn't solve the friction here, we have really smart people like Mathias, genius, just thinking through like, how does this work better? We understand what the process should be. Okay, how can we build technology to remove friction on the process? And so what I would argue is every time you're building technology, if you're not building it to solve a specific problem or meet a particular need, why are you doing it other than your own interest and for, self-indulgence at that point. I mean, there's no reason. It does not need to exist unless it's solving a problem. And so this DataOps space, I think, is a very greenfield thing. Microsoft's not doing a really rich job of making this as clicky, draggy, droppy as we would like inside Power Query. So we're going to have to rely on the community to build tools and solutions and things so that our data teams can grow at scale. Now, this is all to say, Microsoft, I think right now is really just kind of dealing with a lot of paper cuts at Fabric level. They're adding lots of products. They're adding a lot of things here. So I think they're dealing with a lot of paper cuts now. Not who's to say in 3 to 5 years from now, Microsoft doesn't start adding a whole bunch of really interesting DataOps-like processes, or maybe they run out and build a whole bunch of Python libraries and packages, or maybe the community figures out what this is and they build the things that they need, and these then just get bolted onto notebooks and it just starts becoming part of your process. So things will change. It will get easier. Solutions will get made here. But I'm just saying right now, I feel like the friction around DataOps and Fabric is fairly medium to high, and we have to solve these problems ourselves. Sorry, I said a lot there. I'll let you guys unpack. Maybe, Matthias, you're giving me a smirk here. We'll kick it over to you. Thoughts, reactions?
Let me make the point for DataOps
Sure.
once more, because I just thought of another, I think, important reason. You mentioned Copilot in AI, or one of you mentioned.
Copilot. I did that, yeah. Well, I have the shirt for it, so.
Yeah, there we go. Now, AI tools today, they're largely text-based, right? They have a text input and they have a text output. So if your project is merely visual, if it's merely a UI that you click through, somehow that doesn't go together, right? So obviously, DevOps, DataOps, the number one thing we talked about this a few times is you've got source control, which means you actually have a textual representation of the essence of your project, your definitions, your metadata, your logic, your code, your scripts. So you're in a perfect position. Once your project looks like that, once it's basically just a bunch of text files, you're in a perfect position to make the most and the best of AI, because you can feed AI this snippet, and you get the intelligence of the whole world in terms of adding new things, improving it, commenting it, rewriting, you name it. So that would be yet another reason, I think, why it's worth investing into DataOps, and particularly into source control, right?
Okay,
and then
I want to pick real quick. I know you have another point. I just want to pick Tommy. You brought this up yesterday. I'm literally having a light bulb moment as we speak. Matthias, you brought up once your project becomes fully text, now we can really leverage AI. Tommy, you just brought up recently there was an AI feature that we saw earlier around AI can now. It's a blog post from Microsoft. AI can now change your data wrangler scripts over into. So it's going from PySpark, pandas.
Sorry, from pandas to PySpark, and Copilot can do that for you.
Thanks for helping me out. I couldn't quite remember
I got you.
Pandas to PySpark, but to your point, Matthias, code. It's all just code. It's text.
It's text.
Everything was text, and so there's an aha moment coming here with this. Once things get to text format, we don't need to interact with all of the text in the future, but now the computer can understand everything that we're doing in a better way. Sorry.
And allow me to say something here too, because Mike, this is such a good conversation, but you always bring up the commoditization of data, and I think about this when I think about with the Git. I'm like, well, Git's never going to be commodity. However, I'm thinking different now, because there is this idea with AI, and they're calling it the conductors era. This is to your point, Mike. Right? So because think about it. Nothing you're not doing the execution a lot. You're kind of orchestrating what needs to get done. And with all the things in Git or source control or this code, where to your point, I don't need to know what that melt Python function is. I just know I need it. I know what I need to solve. I am orchestrating. I am conducting a lot of the code. I am conducting, dare I say, a lot of the process. And the fact that I don't need to actually be the executioner of it, the AI is. And again, people know we touch on AI a lot, but guess what? It's not going away. Just like I'm not doing a lot of USBs anymore. The internet solves that problem for me. And I think with a lot of the stuff here, where I think the skill set that we're looking for with a lot of users, and this is maybe making me think differently when I'm thinking about data ops or DevOps, is not so much the hard skill, but it's more of a cultural skill. Is if AI is going to be at a point now where it's going to be part of their workflow, not just the code, but also the source control. Like, dude, what Copilot does for me when I do changes to Fabric, the outline of all the changes I've already made and the bullet points, like it's better than I could do. Tell you what, it's like, oh yeah, I did change that semantic model table, like added definitions. And the fact that if I can heavily utilize this, are we completely there yet? No, but we're getting there where, yeah, the average user, it's like, let me help you install Git. I'll do that for you. But outside of that, well, here's this little Copilot button. Just ask it what you needed to do. Well, you got all people. The majority of what people need to know are the principles around some of these what used to be hard code things, and AI is going to be able to Copilot, or these applications are going to be able to take care of a lot for us. Now, all that being said, is that the best practice? I don't know. You probably should still know something, but I know.
We're still on the cusp of things here. I mean, I think, but to your point, Tommy, understanding the concepts of what is good data processing, good data engineering. I'm going back to Matthias's comment here a little earlier. Why can't I point an AI at a table and say, here's the table in bronze. I need this table to have this, and this characteristics about it, and I need you to write these tests about these columns. And like there's going to come a day where I can just speak to it, and it's going to be able to get majority of the way there. And then I think the challenge will become, okay, you've talked to the AI. The AI gave you a logical reason. It's showing you the reasoning of like what it's doing. It's building the development plan. Okay, here's the development plan we're going to build. Choose between whether you're going to use a data flow, a notebook, or write a user-defined function or user data function in Fabric. And the AI will say, well, this table makes sense to be built this way, and this table makes sense to be built that way. We're going to get there. But then my mind goes to, how do we know that it's right? How do we confer that the AI is doing it correctly? We can trust it blindly, but I think we also internally need to be able to, again, discernment, I think, is going to be incredibly important when we work with AI. It's going to help us out. We can focus on the concepts. We're going to need a lot of discernment to say, did this really work? And that's where I think the people are going to need to spend their time. Better prompt engineering, better planning, thinking conceptually, and then letting the AI go to town, and then coming back and saying, we're going to need a follow-up step here that says, is it doing what we want?
At the very least, and this is the last thing, and Matthias, I know you're itching to speak to. At the very least, though, we can bring people rapidly into the development process in the cycle. Even with the introductory knowledge, right? Where they didn't have to previously know all these principles.
Wow. So yet another reason for embracing DataOps and DevOps. I was going to say this last week as well, but it didn't get to it.
Sure.
I really think, in the age of AI, where more and more code generation is actually delegated to AI, what will future engineers do? From my point of view, they're going to be more and more involved in testing, right? So one key skill is prompt engineering. You mentioned it already. Obviously prompting the AI to do something to begin with. But the other thing, and this is going to be bigger and bigger, is to actually formalize the requirements and turn them into tests. So you can afford to delegate as much as possible to AI, because you've got the security of your own tests being run against this before it goes into production, right? And so that applies to software and to data. And I think that there's a huge opportunity here for anyone who's in an engineering role today.
I like the idea of more testing there. it'd be nice if we had better tools to help us with more testing, because everything that I've seen in the past, whether it's testing the semantic model, whether it's testing the report side of things, whether it's, even just the idea of, did I make a change on my semantic model and did I break a visual because I renamed something that I shouldn't have? Like, even just that is like kind of a monumental task at this point. It's very difficult to kind of get through this. And people have built solutions like John Kursky of like, they're using these really cool things and taking images of reports, and it's happening in Michael Kowalski's with Semantic Link Labs. There's a lot of things out there, but it's not easy yet.
And it's not scalable. Yeah. Because the difference though too, I really think we're gonna, until honestly the Power BI file changes, we're gonna deal with this because you can't render a report in any of your IDEs, right? Unlike any other tooling, right? When you actually want to test something, where you can actually see the output in that tool. Well, I have to still open up the binary file. We talked about this last week, where we have this issue with at least semantic models or reports, really, where anything I want to see, like I'm still also working in the output. Every other developer who is a developer they're doing the output. Like they're doing everything to build the output, while our output is also still the exe, is still that binary file. So we're not going to really get, I really don't think we're going to get there with semantic models. To me, it's very much still going to be this tedious process. Now with code, with notebooks, with pipelines, there's we have APIs to actually test that and actually see that output in the environment I'm in. Like if I'm in VS Code, I can still run an API and actually go, oh, that function didn't work. That didn't get pushed to the lakehouse. That's basically more or less not a easily accessible thing with a report tool.
I think the AI is going to get this there. I mean, I want to challenge you, Tommy, like there to some degree. Like we can't get to the place right now. Right now, it's not easy to get to a view of a report and then actually. But I mean, we're not too far away from, hey, Mr. AI, open up this URL, log in with these credentials. Click on these things in the report.
Oh gosh, we are with MCPs actually.
but I'm saying, like when Microsoft turns the flag, so real-time RTI has already got MCPs attached to it, right? There's already tools starting here, right? So take Playwright, marry it with some sort of AI, and now we're getting we're getting scarily close to your back to your point, Matthias, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on this one, right? We're getting to the point where we're just going to need to have good prompt engineering and really explain very detailed requirements back to the AI. And I'm finding the better I think I'm teaching a junior how to do something very explicit, very step-based, the more I can really articulate the words, the better its output becomes. And then I can think about that process, walk away, and it just does stuff and things are coming out that I can get to. So while I agree with your testing portion, we're going to be doing more around testing, but why not I hate writing tests. I never like writing tests. If anything, I want the AI to do is please AI write the tests for me. That's the one thing I don't want to do.
Gentlemen, I need to ask a question based on what we've just talked about. It's not random. I promise here. But knowing what we know now, then this whole conversation, I don't want to wrap up with closing, but I really think there's a bow here to put on this package. Can we rapidly adopt DevOps and DataOps without AI? If we're saying the majority of people are not doing DevOps, but we want them to, can we do that without AI as being an assistant?
Interesting. Who are you going to ask to first? Because I think Matthias would have a better answer than mine.
So... I always like putting you on the spot, Mike, but Matthias, I'm going to lean towards you on this one. Based on the conversations that we had, can we rapidly adopt DevOps and DataOps without the assistance of AI or Copilot?
I'm going to reject the question because
I wish I could do that.
No, Mike knows he does.
No, because we've got the AI, so
it's already here.
Why would you not using it? Why would you not be using it, right? So it's that's why it's not a question for me.
Sounds
It
like
would be
it,
silly. It would be silly not to use it, right? And
I
definitely,
see your
obviously, you're going to
Yeah.
get benefits.
Well played.
I see your
sir.
question,
Well
and I
played.
raise you 2 more questions, Tommy.
Well
You-
played.
you-
Well played.
Matthias called your bluff. I think here is how this one.
Yes.
This one went.
I know that was
so
more
to-
like a Seth-like question, but
So to answer your question directly, Tommy, I will AI accelerate this? 100% it will. I think AI 100% will. And I think really the scary thing right now is users don't understand. One, users don't understand how AI is changing how they're going to be doing work. I think people are very scared about it taking their jobs and we've talked about this in the podcast before, Tommy. AI is making code generation a commodity.
Yeah.
The AI is turning it the same way that Power Query changed my work in Excel into a commodity where I can automate things and have everything go smoothly. Yeah. We're having another fundamental shift, and doggone it, every single app I use, every single one, has some level of either lightweight AI. I mean, this happened fast. I mean, I'm looking again, going back to this, right? ChatGPT in July of last year had 0 hits on my website. 0. Okay. This is Power BI tips. This is we got a lot of traffic coming through. Now it's above every other channel except for Google. And it's aggressively attacking the market share that Google has. So I'm waiting. I'm marking it right now. You can put it down today. What is this? June 24th. Google's going to struggle here. I mean, ChatGPT and AI and large language models are scraping websites, and they are becoming knowledge experts based on existing knowledge that's already out there. And the incumbents in this space for even just knowledge and where knowledge is coming from is greatly going to be impacted by these AI things. And so, it's here. AI's here. We need our challenge is to figure out how to use it to help us with DataOps. It's the challenge is what tooling is the community going to build to use AI to help us build DevOps? What does that look like? So I think we're in another era here. Things are very quickly moving. It's changing very fast, and we're not going to see the realization of what impact AI is really doing for like another 6 months to a year. But when we're going to look back, we're going to say, wow, this is a totally different way of thinking about how things are going to be done in the future. So let me just kind of put my final thought here. I think we're just about at time. Thank you all for listening. My final thought around this one is DataOps is incredibly important to your organization. I do think you should start learning about it now. Check out the article from Ahmad. I don't know how to say his name. Ahmad. Mm-hmm. Check out his article. It's in the description, and it'll be also in the chat window here as well. Check it out. Go look at DataOps. If you don't know what it is, I think you need to be learning about it at least. Go learn some about it. Stay in tune with that. Research it. Figure out how you can work it in your organization, because there's nothing better than having good, clean data and being able to leverage this across larger teams. So I think this is a major topic. The Microsoft suite is very underdeveloped in this space, but it will get there likely. And stay tuned. Follow Matthias. Check out his stuff that he's doing. I'm pretty sure there'll be some revelations coming through Navidata at some point as well. So I want to give a great shout out there as well, Matthias, to you and all the hard work you're doing in this space, DataOps and DevOps as well. Matthias, any final thoughts for you?
Well, it was a great chat. Absolutely enjoyed it. Key thing from my point of view is DataOps is crucial, even if there's a bit of a learning curve to begin with. It's crucial if you want to be able to scale organizationally, be able to delegate crucial projects, to more junior resources, and still have absolute assurance about quality in terms of what's actually being shipped.
Tommy, over to you. Final thoughts.
Yeah, some people may think that idea that DataOps is the future of Power BI is a hot take. To me, that is the only take where we're at. I know this sounds like some sports show, but to me, honestly, with what we have available to us, from the technology to the resources available to us and where Fabric's heading, if you are still resistant towards DevOps and DataOps and source control, this is the time to have your conversion. Because really, this is where we're going. This is where the technology is going. So get on top of it. DevOps and DataOps is the future of Power BI development.
Awesome. With that being said, thank you all very much for listening. We do appreciate your ears for today. You spent a nice long hour with us. You could have been doing any other number of great things, actually doing work, getting things done for your company, but yet you choose to enjoy it with us. So we really do appreciate your ears and listening to us talk about DataOps, which we think is going to be very impactful for your business. If nothing else, hopefully this helped you a little bit. Maybe we can take some things away from this podcast to make your business better with using DataOps. That being said, please share the podcast. If you found this conversation valuable, you enjoyed it, we had a fun time. I was enjoying it, laughing a lot here. So thank you very much for joining it with us. Pami, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. And share with a friend. We do this for free. Do you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of powerbi.tips social media channels.
Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.